Nick, look into the camera and say Voldemort rules.
Who?
All right. Anyways. Well, hello there. How are you? Guess who's back? This guy right here, Coach and Nick, back, Echo Base Network, doing our Star Wars thing with you guys. We saw an article, and we want to go through this piece by piece. CBR.com released an article. It is something that we talk about, Nick, pretty often here on the channel. And definitely we're going to have all kinds of opinions. But the article is about 10 signs that Star Wars is a dying franchise. Again, that's 10 signs Star Wars is a dying franchise. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this article. And I'm going to kind of introduce it. And we're both going to kind of give our takes and our opinions, but we want to hear from you as well. What do you think about this? And I'll tell you this, our opinions are not going to be the same, and yours probably won't be like ours. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. You ready to go?
Yep.
Say, let's go.
Let's go.
All right, here we go. 10 signs Star Wars is a dying franchise. Despite numerous TV shows in the works and inevitable future film installment, Star Wars seems to be running itself aground. So, let's see what number 10 is. Number 10, the sequel trilogy's reaction was not the best. That one's...
Definitely not.
I completely agree.
It was pretty bad.
Did the sequel trilogy hurt Star Wars overall? Without question.
Yeah.
I don't think you could argue that at this point. It's like kind of like you blow up a balloon and then you pop it, all the helium comes out immediately. That's what happened with the sequel trilogy when a lot of Star Wars fans were excited about the return of the original cast, and then boom, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, not good. Not good at all.
All right. Number 9, Star Wars game plan for releasing films has changed. And the example here that we have is Rogue Squadron. It says, originally Lucasfilm announced a ton of Star Wars movies to be released way back in 2020. Remember, Bob Iger said a movie a year kind of thing. And then you had Rian Johnson's planned trilogy. You had the Rogue Squadron, even a film developed by MCU executive producer Kevin Feige, and all that. And now, been pretty quiet in the cinema. Is this an indication, Nick, that Star Wars is dying?
I think so, because Star Wars, I mean, they're really pushing the Disney Plus shows and all that, but Star Wars has never been that. It's always been a theatrical big event, where people are dressed up, people are lined up outside the theater. It's always been a big event. We haven't had that since The Last Jedi. People were pretty excited about that. Going into Rise of Skywalker, people weren't as hyped, for Star Wars at that point in time. And we haven't had anything since then. So yeah, it's not good for the franchise, in my opinion. They really need to get back to the big event movie cinema, theatrical, film releases. But we have no information on anything coming out.
Yeah, I agree with that. Star Wars belongs in a movie theater, and that's where we want to experience it. And I'll tell you what, if The Mandalorian was coming out in the movie theater, I would go see it in the theater. 45-minute, 50-minute show, I would go buy a ticket and watch it. Because Star Wars belongs in a movie theater, in my opinion. Good Star Wars, anyways. Number 8, the original Star Wars trilogy was the peak of Star Wars, and that was a long time ago, 1977 to 1983, everybody. And I think this one is going to be really hard to argue as well, Nick. Without question, peak Star Wars is 1977 and 1980. I mean, to me, it's as plain as the air that I breathe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That was when it was, at its height, and then of course, the prequels came out, and there was a lot of hype around that, but again, there was a lot of disappointed fans with the prequels, every single one of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I know for a lot of the older generation that saw Star Wars in the theaters when it originally came out, by the time Jedi got here, there was a lot of fans that weren't happy with Jedi. Me personally, I love Return of the Jedi. It's one of my favorite ones.
But we were kids still.
Yeah, yeah,
I totally understand somebody that thinks Ewoks is ridiculous.
yeah. And if I would have been, my age now,
Yep.
when Jedi came out, maybe I would feel the same way.
Bro,
But it's,
100% you would feel the same way.
yeah,
It's pretty easy.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. I would hate Ewoks if I were older,
Yeah.
But the fact that, Wicket was my favorite. The Wicket Ewok toy was my favorite toy.
Oh, yeah.
So
Love
the
that
Ewoks don't really bother me, but I totally get how an older fan would be bothered by it.
Yeah. But that space battle at the end was epic.
Number 7, no new characters can measure up to Luke, Han, and Leia. That's easy. Absolutely correct.
Yeah, it's it's like chasing the dragon, trying to get characters to be as big as those characters. It's just not going to happen. But you can still have good characters. I mean, there's a lot of people that love freaking Dash Rendar and Kyle Katarn,
Mara Jade,
Ahsoka,
Grand Admiral Thrawn.
yeah, Mara Jade, Thrawn. So you can have good characters, that aren't as big as the original cast of characters from the originals. I don't think anybody that is writing or doing Star Wars should try to have characters bigger than them, because it would be, a waste of time. It's just not going to happen.
That's one thing. Like when you're talking about characters or the movies or whatever, like this is very similar. Their little point here for number 7. You can't outdo the original characters. Two points ago, they said you can't outdo the original trilogy. Okay,
Yeah.
pretty much the same bullet point, arguably. I agree with it, and I agree with what you're saying. If you want to give us good Star Wars, don't try to compete with. Try to accent. Try to add to. But don't go like directly in competition with the Star Wars that the majority of us grew up and love. Don't try to be bigger or better than. I think the Star Killer base in the sequel trilogy. Okay, Rey being as powerful as she was. The 4-legged walker, whatever it was, the super AT-AT.
Yeah, and then at the end of the Rise of Skywalker, where all the ships come, and they all hyperspace into the planet.
Yeah.
And it's just like bigger and grander than the Return of the Jedi fight.
I've only seen the movie once, so
yeah. Oh man, that was so terrible. Yeah, there's a point where it's like, okay, now you're just trying too hard and trying to do too much. What's the saying they say? Sometimes less is more.
Absolutely. So I think you just gave us a great segue to number 6. Number 6 is more releases means Star Wars is not as special anymore. When George Lucas was the creator, we got one Star Wars film every 3 years during the trilogy runs. And with Lucas, I don't think we ever would have gotten as many shows, as many movies, and all this stuff that Disney has provided. But that's a fair point to say that with more releases, it means that Star Wars is less special. And you mentioned dressing up and things like that. Well, if it's happening all the time, it's not as big of a moment.
Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement there. I said this on Mr. H Reviews stream, I think last week, where I was talking about, it seems like they are just doing all these different Star Wars projects, and just like throwing like, wet wads of paper at the wall and just seeing what sticks. It's just so much different stuff. Like if you look at the lineup coming out, for this year and what they have coming out, the following year, it's just like so much different stuff. And I think Robert Meyer Burnett said it best in our Star Wars sequel trilogy documentary that's doing really well right now, by the way. That, when a corporation buys this property, they are now, as a corporation, looking at like merchandising and all this other stuff that's
merchandising.
All this other stuff that takes away from a singular person's story and thought and creative ideas and stuff. Now it's this big, huge corporate thing, and it's just everything's bigger, and there's just more of it, and because they're trying to squeeze every little cent of profit they can out of this thing. For their shareholders and all that sort of stuff, and it's just become a frickin' circus.
Well, I'm glad you said all that, because that you did it again. That leads us right to the very next point, and here it is.
Oh, sweet.
Number 5, Disney Plus struggles to get viewers for some of their Star Wars shows. And they're absolutely... Think about the ones that we've gotten. Andor, Mandalorian, we're getting Ahsoka, Kenobi, okay? The Book of Boba Fett. Nick, some of those have not gone well overall with the fandom, and it's like interest in Star Wars is waning. There was a time when the anticipation and excitement for The Mandalorian Chapter 3 was at an extreme high. It was like a 10 out of 10. It has dropped significantly because of some of the past releases. The excitement is kind of gone.
Yeah. In looking at the lineup of stuff coming out, literally the only things that I'm even somewhat remotely excited about is Mando Season 3 and Ahsoka. Those are the two things that I really have any interest in. All the other stuff, for me personally, I literally care nothing about it. I have zero interest in any of it. And that all comes down to what they're doing with Star Wars. It's just all these different projects and all this stuff that's just, and a lot of it's just not interesting to me.
Yeah, I get it, man. So here we are, we're 0.4 out of 10. A divisive fan base leads to more mixed projects. So the assumption here, Nick, is that Lucasfilm, are looking at the feedback from the fans. And here's the thing. We know that Jon Favreau looks at the feedback because he sent Mark Hamill one of our videos. Yep. Like we know that for a fact. And it is kind of nice when they say, yes, we look at the fans' response. Now, do I think that all of them do that? Do I think that they all take fan responses into account? I really don't.
No, definitely not.
But I think that some of them do. But the point here is that the fan base being divided leads to more mixed projects. Kind of like the biggest, the most recent news with Star Wars is that we are going to get a new Star Wars movie, and it's going to be set in the sequel trilogy. A year or two ago, I mean, why didn't that happen a year or two ago?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I just don't get it, man. And it's because of this division, and there's a whole nother side to the fandom that's wanting a movie that's not sequel trilogy story continuation. But I guess there's a large contingency of people that do want that. I don't really hear from them very much, but I know that they're out there somewhere. But I don't know. Star Wars definitely needs healing. The fan base needs healing, and I'm not sure how they could do it with one single movie. So to their point here, I think it's a fair point. The fan base being divided leads to more mixed projects. That's why we're getting The Acolyte, ran by Leslie Headland. There's a lot of fans like yourself and me that we're not excited about that show because of the showrunner.
Yeah. And some of the things that the showrunner said, like getting people involved that don't know Star Wars.
Exactly.
Why would you have people doing Star Wars that don't know Star Wars? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Because they want to make Star Wars that doesn't feel like Star Wars.
Yeah. And that's was Andor for me. Now, I know a lot of people will disagree, but Andor felt like they took Star Wars out of Star Wars, and it was just, a generic sci-fi show,
I think that's a fair point. It was Star Wars with a completely new lens.
Yeah. Now, of course, there was stuff in there that was Star Wars, but I'm saying overall, the TIE fighters and all that sort of stuff. There's some cool stuff in there, but I'm just saying the show as a whole.
And what do you say to the people who are going, well, you just want to see the Force and lightsabers and you just want to be entertained with action and duh.
Yeah, I do. 100%. Like, are you going to go watch a Harry Potter film with no magic, wizards,
no magic,
and no magic?
Yep. Harry Potter learns algebra.
Yeah, it's just that's what Star Wars is. The Force is a big, huge part of Star Wars. The Jedi, the Sith, the good versus evil. It's all part of Star Wars, and yeah, I do want that in there.
Okay. Ooh, this one kind of grabs at my heartstrings, man. Point number 3 of 10. This is number 3, count down the list. That is a sign that Star Wars is dying. George Lucas no longer being involved. And I think on the whole, that's definitely true. He's not involved. He does show up. He does have conversations with Dave Filoni. He does go and visit the set from time to time. But I think that we pretty much know how George Lucas feels about the current state of Star Wars because he's said it. He's talked about it. He's been interviewed about it. And it's tough. It's tough for George Lucas and it's tough for the fandom that, I don't think that George Lucas was perfect, but the fact that he is not involved with Star Wars at all, that is an indication that Star Wars, at least, is not as good as it can be.
Yeah, and the thing is with George, he's the creator of all of it. Now, of course, when he did the OT, he got a lot of ideas from other people. Marshall Lucas was heavily involved. It was a more collaborative thing than people give credit to that.
I agree with you.
So it wasn't 100% him. But the thing is, he's the creator of Star Wars. So I think having him involved is important. I would want to have him involved. If I owned the rights to Star Wars, I would want to have him involved. Maybe I wouldn't take every single one of his ideas exactly verbatim the way he says it and wants it and thinks it should be, but I would definitely take those thoughts and ideas and then maybe put, my own thoughts or ideas or twists on it to where I think, the fans would be more well received or something. Because there's a lot of stuff in the prequels that I would not have done at all, and I would have given pushback on. But as the documentary on all that said, George Lucas was surrounded by yes men.
Sure,
nobody was arguing with him. So yeah, I think he should definitely be involved, and his thoughts should be, at least listened to. But Disney has no interest in listening to really anything he has to say.
So I am going to push back on the article right here. Like, as a fan, as a lifelong fan of Star Wars, I do wish George Lucas was involved. But I don't think at Lucas's age now, and, he doesn't want to be involved. He wants to do the family thing and the philanthropy thing. George Lucas not being involved in Star Wars at this point, I don't think that is indicative of Star Wars is dying. I don't think he would be. He sold it and he walked away. So does it hurt? Sure. Is Star Wars as good as it could be? No, without his involvement. So I will go as far to say that, but him not being involved doesn't mean that it's dying, in my opinion. Point number 2 out of 10. The number 2 reason why Star Wars is dying They say that the Skywalker saga commanded a lot of attention, and now the Skywalker saga is over. Now, can Star Wars exist outside of the Skywalker saga? We don't know. That's what we're going to find out. And here's the thing. Here's the thing about that, Nick. To me, the sequel trilogy was not the Skywalker saga.
Not at all. It was the Rey saga.
Yeah, how did that have anything to do with the Skywalkers?
Yeah, it was the Palpatine saga.
Exactly.
And if you look at the entire trilogy, prequel to end of the sequels, it's like the whole thing is about Palpatine. Yeah,
it shifted there. When it was Vader centric as the bad guy, as the big bad. Now it's not anymore. I agree with you. But you know what? George Lucas had a lot to do with that too, with the Clone Wars cartoon and everything, with the way that the prequels went and everything. So that shift did happen. I agree with you there. But the Skywalker saga commanded a lot of attention, and it's now over, and we're not getting it back.
Yeah, and the thing is, Rogue One wasn't dealing with the Skywalker saga, even though Vader makes an appearance in there. But the story itself wasn't really about that, and it did well. It was probably the most well-received Disney Star Wars movie that's come out.
Right.
So I think it can do good without having ties to the Skywalker saga. It's just is going to depend on what the story and what the characters are, and how they go about doing it.
All right, folks. Well, here we go. The number one reason why, according to CBR, that the Star Wars is dying. Here it is. Number one, it has tough competition with many other franchises, and they've got, Disney animated movies there. They've got, I guess that is The Matrix, Neo. You got Super Mario. Interestingly enough, they got a picture of Mando and Grogu there. Spider-Man, indicative of, the MCU, perhaps. So there is some competition, but Star Wars has always had competition. And I don't agree with this point, Nick. Here's my ultimate thing, okay? Here's how I feel about it on the whole. Just because Star Wars has been on a decline over the past 3 or 4, 5 years, maybe it has been declining. It's had its moments where it's kind of like that heartbeat deal, looking at a EKG or whatever, a heart rate monitor. It's had those moments where it's bumped up really, really good with like different moments in The Mandalorian or maybe Andor or whatever you guys like. But overall, it's on a decline. Now, I think Star Wars is too big to die, personally. Like, think about the money that they made with the sequel trilogy, and to us, it was a failure. What is really competing against Star Wars? And is whatever they're competing against, is that really going to make Star Wars die? No. And we're at a really tricky part in the history of entertainment, because you had a great science fiction film come out last year in Dune, and they almost didn't get a Dune Part 2.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the best movie I've seen in the theater in years. I am a fan of that series, of that franchise, and we almost didn't even get a Dune Part 2, guys. So if Star Wars is dying, even though it is on a decline, if Star Wars is dying, then everything is. That's basically my take. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think Star Wars will ever completely be dead, because there's always going to be somebody that's going to like what they're doing.
All they have to do is make a video game, bro.
Yeah. I mean, they literally could make a video game. I mean, some of these other shows and cartoons and stuff that they're doing, there's fans that really love those shows and the stuff that they're doing. There's always somebody that's going to like what they're doing.
Sure.
But the thing is, it's not on the scale that Star Wars should be. It should be, like at the end of Mando season 2, with Luke's return, that was huge. Like, you had very little amount of people not liking what they did there.
The only
The vast
criticism I
majority of
ever
people-
heard was somebody talking about the deep fake.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
it. That was it.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I don't remember any criticism.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some out there. I remember hearing some, like people thought it was like too little, too late, or that they were shoehorning him in there to try to get fans back or something. There was a few people here and there that was criticizing them, even bringing Luke into it. Me personally, I loved it. I absolutely loved that. It's by far the greatest moment in Disney Star Wars since they've bought it, in my opinion.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't think it'll ever completely be dead. But the thing is, if they are not going, and I've always said this, if they would cater to the hardcore fans such as ourselves, not only would they have us, but all the other people would also still like it.
Yeah.
When I think about what I would want to see them do, I don't really see anybody being against or being like, oh, this is dumb. Like, all those people that just like everything Star Wars are still going to like it anyways, So yeah, I don't see it going anywhere, but I do see it potentially getting to the point to where they are hemorrhaging and losing money, and it's just not profitable. It's not as profitable as it should be.
Well, that's what a decline is. Yeah,
yeah, I can see it being at that point. At that point, and it's probably a little bit at that point now already.
Well, guys, thank you for tuning in and watching this as we go through this top 10 list of the reasons why Star Wars is dying. Mostly, I disagree, even though I do agree with most all of the singular points. I don't think that Star Wars is dying. I do think that it's been on a decline, and we told you why. Let us know in the comments what you think. Make sure you come by and see us this Saturday night at our weekly live stream where we discuss all things happening in Star Wars. This guy will be back, this Harry Potter expert right here that talked about Harry Potter. He is an expert on all things Voldemort. Nick, look into the camera and say Voldemort rules.
Who?
All right. Anyways, love you guys. We'll see y'all later. We are Echo Base Network. Laters.
See you guys.